All right, let's keep moving at pace. Next up, please welcome data engineer at Ports of Auckland, Manvi Madan.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Manvi Madan, and I'm a data engineer working for Ports of Auckland. Today, I'll be speaking to you about why do machine learning and AI projects fail. I know I didn't choose the most glamorous topic, but I thought with all this conversation around generative AI and ChatGPT, it was really important to have a conversation about what really happens when organizations make the first moves in attempting those first few machine learning and AI use cases in their organizations. And what happens? What are some common traps to avoid when you attempt these use cases in a bid to move from BI to AI in your organizations? Before I talk about any of that, let's take a look at all the media hype around AI. The headline that grabbed my attention from this slide is about ChatGPT acquiring its first million users in a record-breaking time. It took less time for ChatGPT to acquire its first million users than it did Instagram. And that, as a fact, is astonishing to me. ChatGPT caught the attention of technical and non-technical people alike. And if you'd notice, every conversation today has mentioned it at least once. Fair to say it has been a huge success? Now let's take a look at the flip side. The headline that grabs my attention from this slide, for obvious reasons, is about Amazon's AI recruitment tool being actively biased against its female candidates. Now, that's a headline about your AI initiatives that you don't want to see in the news. So how do we make sure that when we are trying to implement these use cases in our organizations, we are doing so responsibly? We are using AI for good. When I started reflecting on this, I wanted to figure out what happens with most of the machine learning and AI use cases that the organizations attempt. So I went out to look for a number that would quantify the risk of these projects failing. I'm a numbers person. I really like numbers. So I went looking for one. Didn't like what I found, though. The number is 85. According to Gartner, 85% of machine learning and AI use cases that are ever attempted across the board fail to meet their success criteria. Anybody who works in their data domain kind of knows this anecdotally, but I didn't expect that number to be as high as 85. So it got me thinking. If you look at the specialized talent that you need to hire to implement these use cases, the investment that has to be made in your data infrastructure, in your cloud infrastructure to implement these use cases, a failure rate of 85% is worrisome. I started reflecting on my own experiences in the domain, started speaking to a lot of experienced colleagues, and did some research as to why that number is as high as 85%. And it boils down to these three reasons. There's a lot of reasons why projects fail, but these are the top three reasons as to why machine learning and AI projects fail. The first and the most common cause is lack of machine learning ready data. Now you would ask me, every organization has data, is it not machine learning ready? To that I'll say, any data that does not have a touch point with your data infrastructure, with your data platforms, I wouldn't call it machine learning ready. The data has to be available for your data engineers, data scientists, machine learning engineers, and data scientists to use whenever they want to use it, and in a form that it is usable. Fair to say, Excel spreadsheets that are being manually updated and floating across the business via Teams messages or emails do not really qualify. The second one here is about lack of domain expertise in the team implementing machine learning and AI solutions. And I learned this one especially the hard way, because I was always the domain expert in the team implementing the solutions, because I'd worked with the business long enough that I understood the processes well enough. It was only a challenge when I started working in a domain that I didn't know fully myself. Year was 2020, the world was grappling with the realities of a pandemic, and everybody wanted to be a part of a solution, and I wanted to do something too. So I participated in MIT COVID-19 Datathon. I worked together with domain experts to create a solution that would quantify super spreadability of different types of businesses. Not only did we win the Datathon, we got published in NPJ Digital Medicine, which is a Nature Index journal. But the most important impact that project made was it was being used to predict COVID-19 hospitalizations by a major healthcare system in US. Got me thinking, what was different about that project as opposed to the other projects I'd been a part of, which weren't that successful? I think the winning formula was the right composition of domain experts working alongside data experts to co-create an AI solution that would add value. The last thing here, and this is the one that keeps me up at night as an AI engineer, is the lack of AI ethics and governance in the organizations that are trying to implement AI and machine learning use cases. Now, this is concerning because we want to use AI for good. We want to do so responsibly, but lack of ethical and governance guidelines makes engineers kind of question, how do we implement the guidelines and the frameworks that have been given to us? I'll touch on this again. So what can you do in your organizations if you're enabling this transformation from BI to AI? These are some common pitfalls to avoid. First and foremost, don't believe machine learning to be magic. It's going to be sounding very obvious, but it's not a silver bullet. Like anything, it has its own pros and cons. And if I'm being honest to you, hand to heart honest with you, it's not even going to be the right approach for a majority of your data analytics needs. But for when it is the right approach to be used, and we have thought long and hard about why we are using AI in this space, then if you implement the solutions using the right data, the right team, the right ethical settings, you can expect to see unprecedented productivity gains. But it is by no means a silver bullet. The second thing to focus on is, if your organization still doesn't have one source of truth for critical metrics that matter to you, maybe it's time to park machine learning and AI and focus on that first. Because all the machine learning and AI use cases live and die with the data you feed them. And if you're feeding them garbage data, we all know, garbage in, garbage out. The last thing to keep in mind is the management for these projects would look a little bit different from end-to-end perspective. There are similarities. They are still a piece of software, so all the software engineering principles apply. But the design and development phase looks fundamentally different. It's closer to experimentation than it is to anything else. And the post-deployment support also looks different. There are specialized challenges with machine learning and AI use cases that you have to be mindful of, things like concept shift, data drift, and challenges that come with any other data-intensive product, like data quality issues, data integrity issues. It's fair to say the management for these projects end-to-end look a little bit different. I talked quite a bit about what not to do if you're implementing machine learning and AI. I leave you with a bit of advice on what can you do if your organization is at the cusp of making this transition from BI to AI. Focus on these three things. Focus on adding more data to your data platforms. This can be done by making sure that we are being proactive, and whenever a new source system is being added to your organization, be proactive and enable an integration and bring that data into your data platform so that it's ready to be used. Another avenue that often gets ignored is you can get into strategic partnerships with other people across the sector to acquire some of these well-governed, good quality data assets that you can use to build AI and machine learning products on. Second thing to keep in mind is, when you're thinking about bringing on new talent to implement these use cases in your organizations, and you have a very small data practice team, I would recommend adding the data science, machine learning, and AI talent to that team instead of standing up a siloed practice. I say this because data doesn't exist in a silo. There's context wrapped around data, and there are nuances to the processes that generate this data. You want those nuances captured in your AI systems so that it can make predictions accurately. And that will only happen if these systems are being co-created by your data science machine learning talent, people who understand the nuances of the data, and even your stakeholders if they can be involved in the process. The last thing to keep in mind, and the one that I'm absolutely passionate about, is make sure your AI strategy is enabling responsible AI practices in your organization. This is about making sure that when we are building AI products, they are fair, inclusive, transparent, safe and secure, and they respect the privacy of the customers whose data is being used in them. I was really thrilled to see that there was somebody who was talking about explainable AI at this place, because that's a conversation we absolutely need to have. Because a lot of times when we have conversation about, yeah, we need to make our systems inclusive, transparent, blah, 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 you don't really know how it translates to the engineering rigor. As an engineer, I'm like, how do I make this happen? And there are a lot of frameworks out there that you can look up, but I'll make it simple for you. It's still about doing the basics right. I know with all the glamour around AI and machine learning, it's easy to forget that it's still about doing basics right. It's still about making sure that we understand our raw data enough. We understand the limitations of our raw data. If our raw data has bias in it, there's no chance the end product wouldn't. It's still about making sure we understand the limitations of the modeling techniques we are using. Because if we don't understand those limitations, we cannot wrap processes around our products to mitigate the risks that come with it. It's still about making sure that we don't use just one metric to evaluate success, but multiple metrics. For example, if you're doing an AI and machine learning use case in the customer retention space, there will be evaluation metric that your engineers and data science people would use to evaluate if the model is doing what it needs to. But don't stop at that. Identify another metric in your organization that you already use to evaluate customer success or customer satisfaction scores. And keep an eye on that metric, because likely this AI model is going to have an impact on that metric. this will give you a complete picture of if your AI system and your machine learning models are doing in the real world what you would want them to. And the last of it all, you want to still design human-centered AI design systems. And this boils down to understanding the person who would be working alongside this AI system in a process. For example, if I'm deploying a vessel ETA prediction model to work alongside my berthing team to give them some heads up if a vessel is going to be delayed, if the model just goes on and says, this is the prediction, these are the vessels that are going to be delayed, there's a very low chance that the berthing manager would even care about it. For them to be able to trust this model and use this in their system to make decisions, the model has to go, these are the vessels that I believe are going to be delayed. This is how confident I feel. And these are the features that make me believe so, things like wind and tide and the weather conditions. That would make the berthing manager go, that seems likely. Likely this vessel is going to be delayed. I need to change the schedule. So it's still about understanding the humans that will be interacting with this AI system to make decisions. As I said, with all the grammar around AI and machine learning, it's easy to forget that to do it right, it's still about doing the basics right. Now, I'll quickly wrap up. If your organization is at the cusp of making this transition from BI to AI, focusing on data, team, and responsible AI practices would go a long way than focusing on any of the buzzwords. Thank you so much for listening to me. I hope this has been valuable. It's truly an honor to be up on this stage. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thank you very much, Manvi. Taking quickfire to the next level. That was fast-paced and fantastic.